All right, hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my preliminary War Within tank tier list. Right now it's Monday, right before pre-patch, so a few changes are still coming. So far, I think most of the tank. I don't think there's going to be like massive, major changes to any of the tanks. So maybe they'll change like up or down one tier, or if these tiers are even real. But they'll get a little bit better or worse as the beta progresses or as the people learn to play the game when the season comes out. But I think this is kind of where I'd put the tanks right now, just as a preliminary look. Everyone's been asking on stream whenever I play beta, oh, what tanks are looking good? So this is my answer to that for now. All right, so we'll start from the bottom. First of all, the worst tank by far is Prot Paladin. They have really good utility, though change that Blizzard made to mobs where they recast after being AoE stopped or just normal stopped, but they don't recast on interrupt, makes Prot Paladin's utility in a really good spot because Avenger's Shield will make them not recast. However, the first requirement for tank is that you can survive, and Prot Paladin is just not tanky right now. So one major change that they did to all the tanks with attack power healing based healing, so that's Word of Glory, Ignore Pain, and Celestial Brew are the three big ones, is that it heals for a lot less. So on live, the tooltip information on my Word of Glory is like 1/4 of my max health. On beta, even after a 10% buff, it's like less than 1/12. So it's 3 times less compared to your max HP. On top of that, Prot Pally is just not tanky when you walk into packs. Like I walk into a pack with Sentinel and Goak active, which is like illegal to actually overlap these cooldowns because they're so strong. If I walk into a pack with both of them active, I'm like as tanky as a Blood DK with Vamp Blood only. Prot Paladin is simply just not tanky right now. It can't heal itself really. Lightsmith is kind of like Lightsmith Holy Shield healing / shielding is more healing than like your own Word of Glories. So Prot Pally is just in the dumpster right now, tankiness wise. Hopefully, I'm hoping for some major changes to Prot Pally because it's actually just illegal to zone into the key as a Prot Paladin right now. Everyone asks me about Prot Paladin because I love Prot Paladin. It's my favorite tank, but yeah, it's just unplayable right now. Like everyone always asks me about it, and I tell them I would rather tank the key as a Frost or Unholy DK at this current moment. Next, we'll get into the tanks that can actually survive a real key. Prot Warrior, I think, is on the list. I think it's closer to the bottom. One thing about Prot Warrior is that you don't really have that much self-healing compared to the other tanks. So you are very, very reliant on your healer. On top of that, a design flaw, in my opinion, with Prot Warrior, ever since Dragonflight Season 1, is that Spell Reflect is such a massive portion of your damage on certain bosses, and it's completely useless outside of that, other than like some magic DR, which means that Blizzard kind of is forced to just balance Prot Warrior poorly, because if you're doing good damage all the time and then also you have Spell Reflect, then you're just OP, right? So they have to make it so that, oh, this is that one boss where Prot Warrior is really cool on, but then outside of that, they can't be OP, otherwise, it'll just be OP. So yeah, like some bosses, Spell Reflect is Giga broken on. For instance, in Stone Vault, there's a mech that does a tank buster, and you can Spell Reflect it, and that tank buster is very deadly for other tanks, but for Warrior, it's just instead 40% of your damage. One thing about Pro Warrior is they did fix the cheat death talent, the one at the bottom, and they gave him a few extra talent points on the left. Pro Warrior is looking, I'd say, stronger than in Dragonflight by a very small amount, but the design flaw of Spell Reflect is still there, so their damage is very low outside of Spell Reflect compared to other tanks. Their raid buff is not very useful because ever since Augmentation Evoker was introduced, it's just not legal to play melee DPS in the highest keys, so that's unfortunate for Prot Warrior as well. So I'm putting them in the C tier. Above Prot Warrior, I believe, are... I think we can put them in the B tier, because I don't think we need that many tiers. So above that, I think, is Brew and VDH. I put them in the same level. VDH, I believe, is slightly weaker compared to Brew, personally wise, like DPS wise. But they have Chaos Brand, so that just automatically like skyrockets them like over here as raid buffs go. As far as raid buffs go, because I don't think Havoc is looking that good right now. So if you want Chaos Brand in your group, and of course, the majority of every single high N+ group damage is magic damage, just because, Blizzard sucks at balancing their game. And so Chaos Brand is just way better than Mystic Touch. In terms of survivability, Brew kind of is tankier baseline. Like if you just have spikes as a VDH, that's way less tanky than a Brew who is just like playing the game normally with no cooldowns. But one thing about VDH is that there's the Fellscarred hero talent tree, which is what I recommend if you're tanking keys as VDH. There's Fellscarred, and I was also playing no Spear Bomb with double Fiery Brand. So what that does is with Fellscarred, you basically have extremely high Metamorphosis uptime, and with double Brand, you can kind of just, like you're in meta for so long, you can just send a Brand at the start of meta for damage, And then by the time your meta's over, you're like, you have 2 brands back again, almost. But you can basically just be in meta or brand for like the whole time while you're playing VDH. After the nerfs, you aren't that there is a little bit of downtime. That's when you have to kite. It's kind of like kite meta Omega Lol. But if you're tanking with just spikes, then VDH is very weak. So that's why, in my opinion, you should play. That's why I play the build I do. Felsguard with double brand. So you have very high uptime on your defensives. You do require a healer because the healing from frailty has been significantly nerfed. You don't have your season 3 tier set, so your soul generation is not that good. Even though you do have some souls from your tier set, it's still not that great. You do need a healer. So with Brew, I think your damage intake baseline is a lot lower because you have Gift of the Ox, you have Stagger was recently buffed. If you don't have a healer, I think you will also quickly perish as a Brewmaster. VDH, like with meta and brand, you can kind of just stay alive until those are over without a healer, but with Brew, I think you just need a healer the whole time. That's kind of just the agenda Blizzard's been pushing, so this is probably just the reality that all tanks are facing. I think they're probably a bit more sustainable than Prot Warrior. Like, Brew has some external healing, like they have the Ox Spheres, even though they recently got nerfed. They can Vivify themselves, they can Transcendence, and they have Guy Plin's Brew on Purifying Brew and Celestial Brew, even though it's kind of weak right now. So it's not like they're completely not able to heal themselves, it's just without a healer, you will quickly perish, I think, as a Brewmaster. Next, we have the top 2 tanks, in my opinion, are Blood Decay and Bear. So one thing about Bear is that all the other druids right now are feeling kind of weak. So if you want Mark of the Wild in the group, it almost definitely has to come from Bear. Our druid was looking like it does pretty good damage, and you can, you know, with Mage Og in the group, heal like the low like 11/12 keys we've been doing. But I think as the key levels get higher, you will get heal checked as a Resto Druid. At least that's what, you know, some of the Resto Druids I talked to have been telling me, especially compared to an HPAL or a Resto Shaman. So if you want Mark of the Wild in the group, right now I think Bear is the best source of it in Mythic Plus. Bear also got a really good hero talent tree in the Moon Bear. Basically, you can just play... So in Dragonflight Season 1, this is like a bit of a history lesson, you would play Bear without Tooth and Claw most of the time, I think. You would just play like your only Rage Spender as Iron Fur. You wouldn't ever use Maul pretty much, and you also wouldn't... Like, Raze wasn't even in the game, or was a massive DPS loss to use it. So you would just play builds like that would use Moonfire and spam Iron Fur. So that's basically what the Moon Bear is, except now your Moonfires do insane damage, so you can kind of just get away with playing a super defensive build from your talent tree while just doing decent damage still with your Moonfires. It is really boring for me, in my opinion, to play, because like you don't even push Swipe Enter. You have like Moonfire, Mangle, Thrash, and Iron Fur. Those are like your 4 rotational buttons, and then you have like 3 cooldowns to push, and that's it. You can play with or without Incarn. I've seen the build without Incarn, basically because Incarn costs so many talent points. Like, you have the talent into Berserk, like puts a few points into Berserk in the middle and some at the top, and then 2 more at the bottom. You can trade those for like Boundless Moonlight, which is 10% DR to all targets with your Moonfire, which is just all the targets now. And you also get an extra one out of like After the Wildfire tree, compared to the Incarn build, which kind of has to not take one of those. Either you either have to skip After the Wildfire or some of the other, or like one of the other things in the middle that are good to get Incarn. So there's the build with Incarn and no Incarn. I think they're both fine. Like, Incarn is definitely strong because it just gives you another huge cooldown that you can use to survive. But yeah, it does cost talent points, so both of those builds are viable. And then more about Bear. Oh, your group healing after the Wildfire got pretty nerfed, but Dream of Cenarius actually got buffed. I believe Regross initial hit was buffed by like 50% for all Druid specs. So Dream of Cenarius is actually quite strong now for a Guardian. That is one thing I noticed. Your off healing potential is there. I don't think it's after the Wildfire. Like, you can still play it with the no Incarn build, but I think if you're not playing if you're playing with Incarn, then you probably play Dream of Cenarius and not After the Wildfire, in my opinion. All right, so that's Bear. Next, we'll talk about Blood Decay. So Blood Decay got a massive rework to Death Strike, where Death Strike can only heal every damage event can only be healed by 1 Death Strike. So what does that mean? So that means if you Death Strike once every 5 seconds, then you're not missing out on any healing unless the Death Strike healing amount is like more than 100% of your health. So if in pulls where you're taking mass amounts of damage, you still want to Death Strike, like, I would say every 3-ish seconds. But in pulls where your damage intake is kind of low, then you're not losing any healing by doing it every 5. So what that means is build choices that make it so you want to Death Strike more often, such as Send Lane or building High Haste, in particularly those two, are a lot weaker now because the successive Death Strikes you do aren't as strong. Obviously in pulls, as I said, where you're taking like your whole health bar every 2 seconds or something, you can still Death Strike a lot and it'll be valuable. But for lower damage intake pulls, it's way more value to Death Strike, to have like heavier Death Strikes. It's actually more value to have heavier Death Strikes all the time. It's just that haste is like somewhat valuable if your damage intake is too high. So the stat prio is definitely going to be Verse Mastery. Haste also doesn't do anything for your damage because a lot of your damage now comes from the Deathbringer tree and from Blood Plague, and haste doesn't help any of that. So haste is like bad for damage. It's only good to reduce your GCD basically. I would still play roughly 10% just for my tests, but who knows what the actual number is. So you definitely want to play Deathbringer. And Blood Decay also does massive damage right now. I would say it's actually close to VDH counting Chaos Brand. That's how high the damage is. I think it's like a bit too high. It's probably going to get tapped down, but we'll see how that goes. Right now, Blood Decay so far for me has felt like the most smooth tank, the easiest to play, and the easiest to survive with. However, Blood Decay always looks good on beta. Don't be fooled by this, because every time on beta, people are never doing like the highest possible keys because, you know, half people don't even know what's going on. So the key levels are kind of lower. So you're not reaching the point usually where you're just getting one shot. And that is the main weakness of Blood Decay. It's that while you're able to self-sustain yourself most of the time, when you stop being able to sustain yourself, you just die. Because, for instance, for Bear, Vengeance Demon Hunter, and Brew, the way you die is usually because you're not receiving enough healing, and it's not because you're getting one shot. I mean, VDH kind of gets one shot if you're outside cooldowns, and Bear too to an extent, but usually you have like enough cooldown options that you can rotate through them and you will make yourself like healable by a healer. Blood Decay doesn't have that option. If you can't heal yourself, a healer probably can't help you. Like if you could tank a 13 with no healer, then you probably can't tank a 14 with a healer. Whereas with Bear, like it's not like that. If you could tank a 12 with a healer without a healer, then, you know, maybe you can take a 15 with a healer, you know, something like that. The fact that, you know, healers do exist in World of Warcraft, and especially with the new design decisions Blizzard has made, they kind of want healers to be healing tanks, I guess. Makes me think that Blood Decay, while it does feel like by far the strongest tank right now on beta, that might be Cope for later in the season. You know, only time will tell. All right, so that's where I'm at with tanks. Thanks everyone for watching. Peace out.